Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg. I'm here today to do a book tag video. It is Tag Tuesday, as they say. However, first let me explain the new surroundings. So, as you know, it is summer, and that means that the teenager, my foster son, is home during the day. So I figure I will let him sleep, and the room I usually record my videos in is directly next to his. So I'm here in the office we have downstairs, which I don't usually use because I prefer to sit with the dogs when I'm working from home. That's just how I roll. But in the interest of letting him sleep, I figured I would just relocate a couple of times. So there you go. But I am here today to do the Shameless Book Tag. I was tagged in this by the originator of the Weird Book Club. Oh god, I think his name is Dan. I hope his name is Dan, but I will link his video down below regardless. And if I got the name wrong, I really am sorry. But I will do the tag. I am not going to show as much skin as Dan showed in his video, but I will leave an extra button undone. So there you go. Let's get started. The first prompt is Shamelessness Personified. Talk about a book, character, or writer who you feel best embodies what it means to be shameless. Well, strictly speaking, I have never read a book by Hunter S. Thompson, but I did have a history teacher in high school who used to read us excerpts from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas whenever he was bored, which, come to think of it, was actually a lot. And since that did happen a lot, I'm going to count Hunter S. Thompson as an author that I've read. And I can't think of a more shameless character in the literary world. I mean, enjoy him if you will. He's clever, he's funny, he's a great writer, and he is certainly one of the biggest literary personalities of the last century. But I do think it's funny how everything he does absolutely screams, hey, it's funny how nobody would put up with my crap if I was anybody other than a white male in America. Lols for life! Prompt number 2. The Shameless Suck Up. Talk about a book outside your comfort zone that you read mainly because you appreciate or admire the person who recommended it. Well, I can't really think of anything outside of my comfort zone that I've read because of a recommendation, but I will say I did read most of The World According to Garp because one of my friends said it was one of his favorite books. I had already read and severely disliked The Cider House Rules. I'd already read In One Person and felt very meh about it. Both of those are books by John Irving, in addition to The World According to Garp. And but I decided to give it a try. I'm always curious about books that people describe as their favorites. I went for it. I did not finish. I may listen to the audio at some point because my friend did tell me that the reason it's one of his favorite books has to do with the ending. I don't know what that means since I didn't get to the ending, but I may try it again. Another fun story for you. The general manager of a Borders that I worked at once recommended The Fermata by Nicholson Baker to me, and it turned out to be basically porn. So that was awkward. Prompt number 3, Shameless Plug. Talk about a book or writer you will recommend to anyone you meet because they need more attention, damn it. Well, I'm going to go with the book that I gift to people the most, which is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. It is wonderful. If you have not read it, I absolutely think you should jump on it, like right now. Like right now. Go do it. Prompt number 4, Shameless Snob. Talk about a text that speaks to your very, very particular interests, stuff so obscure that it almost feels like the book was written just for you. Well, maybe I'm boring, but I feel like I don't have a lot of things that are very specific to me. But I do have a particular fascination with the Academy Awards. I used to study the winners. And so I had all of the Best Picture, Actor, Actress, Supporting Actor, and Supporting Actress categories back to 1950 memorized. I'm not that good at it anymore, but I used to study this thing. And I think that is probably bizarre, according to most people. So there are a couple of books that tie into that. One is The Big Show, High Times and Dirty Dealings Backstage at the Academy Awards by Stephen Pond. I maybe read this book twice. I'll never tell. Another one is the Academy Awards Handbook. This was put together by John Harkness. They used to put out a new edition of this book every year after there were new Academy Award winners. As you can see, they have not done a new edition since 2003. Because this is now a very dated cover. Basically, I'm sure they stopped doing it because all of this information is online now, so people don't need to buy a mass market book about it. But it goes year by year, and it lists the winners in all of in every category, and then it has a summary of the Oscars that year and the movies that were competing. So to me, that was fascinating, and this is actually what I used to study the winners of the Academy Awards when I was doing that. And a third book on that same topic is Pictures at a Revolution, 5 Movies and the Birth of the New Hollywood by Mark Harris. So basically, this takes the Best Picture nominees from the cinematic year 1967, but the Oscar year 1968, because the Oscars are always held a year later. And it examines this as a turning point in cinema, because in the 60s the studio system began to fail, strict censorship codes began to fail. So it looks at this year as a kind of turning point in cinema, and it does that by looking at the 5 Best Picture nominees, which were Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, In the Heat of the Night, and Dr. Dolittle, as movies that were emblematic of that change in ways that they went right, and the ways in which, in the case of Dr. Dolittle, everything went wrong. It's a fascinating book. If you don't follow Mark Harris on Twitter, I also recommend that. He is probably my favorite Twitter follow. He's a great journalist and a great personality to follow there. Prompt number 5, Shameless Fan. Talk about a book or writer you know you'll keep returning to despite the fact that there are literally millions of other things you could be reading. I am going to go with Tom Perrotta. And the reason I'm going to go with this is that I keep going back to him because I want his books to be like these 3. There's Bad Haircut, which is stories of the 70s. There's Election. There's Little Children. I really liked these 3 books, and I keep going back to him wanting this experience, and I'm not really getting it. You know, it sounds weird to complain that his books feel similar when they do have very different topics and approaches. Election is kind of about a high school government election. Little Children is about an affair in a neighborhood where a child molester has just moved in. Bad Haircut is basically stories about Tom Perrotta's childhood that have been fictionalized. He's also written books about the rapture and about the controversies around sexual education, so it feels weird to complain that his books feel the same, but I think what does it is that he basically transplants the same characters from one book to the next, so they do have a certain sameness about them. And I would say that his treatment of women gets more and more problematic as he continues to write books, because basically it feels like the men are these lovable loafs who can kind of get away with anything, and the women always get held much more accountable than the men, and that's kind of gross. So I'm going with Tom Perrotta for that one. Number 6, buckle up, because there's a rant coming. Talk about Shameless Hater. Talk about a trending or popular book or author you did not enjoy, and you don't care who knows it. Well, I'm going with An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. I really don't understand why this book seems like it's only getting more and more popular as time goes on. So in the book, Roy and Celestial have been married for about a year when Roy is wrongly arrested for something he did not do, but he ends up in prison anyway. That tests their relationship, as Roy's whole young life is basically thrown out because he's in prison, and Celestial finds herself in a world where everybody's just moving on without Roy. Frankly, I thought the plotting in this book was a nightmare, because so many people have said to me it's such a shame that their marriage never really had a chance, which boggles my mind, because when we meet Roy and Celestial, their marriage is not working. It seems pretty clear they're headed for a divorce at some point. And when Tayari Jones gives us the backstory of their relationship, it feels really clear to me these people probably shouldn't have been dating, let alone in a marriage together. So I feel like the hard part about their relationship is not that Roy going to prison for something he did not do tests their marriage. It's because Roy going to prison ends up accidentally binding them together for longer than they should have been, because they should have been on their way out. They were already way past their expiration date at the time the book is beginning. Furthermore, there are so many instances in this book where I could not fathom what was happening or why. I thought the circumstances of Roy's arrest didn't quite make sense, which does not excuse or justify what happens to him. It just means that on top of everything else that happens in the book, I really have a hard time believing what happens in this book. There's a twist about Roy's cellmate that I thought was fully ludicrous. The character of Andre never made sense to me, and Celestial's business sounds like the kind of insane retail gimmick that would only ever work in a novel. Would have no real-world application at all, I would say. And finally, I really, really hated that the entire plot of the book hinges on Celestial being one of the most passive characters in recent literary fiction. Basically, none of this book would happen if she made a single decision and spoke up about it. And that feels like horrible plotting to me, because if you can say none of this would have happened if one person did just anything, like anything, then it's not a good book. And I can see why people like this. When I did a review of this a while back in a video, I said that this would be a good book club pick because what I do appreciate about what Tayari Jones does here is that she gives room for you to, because we all bring our own emotional baggage into a book, she gives you room to make up your own mind about which character you identify with and which character you don't like or disagree with. And I think that would make it a good book for a discussion with a lot of people. I think that this book has done a lot to start conversations about the prison system in America and how it unjustly treats African Americans. However, I don't think a whole lot of that is actually in the book. So there you go. I understand why people like this book, but I really did not. If I read this in December, and if it had been this year, it would be a contender for one of my worst reads of the year. Okay, that's my rant. Prompt number 7, The Shameless Flirt. Talk about a book that really turned you on in that special way or touched you emotionally in a way that others might find embarrassing. Well, I really don't think any book has hit me in that special way, so that leaves me the embarrassing option. I will say that if I'm in a reading rut, I usually turn to mystery novels, but occasionally, maybe once every other year, not actually that often, but occasionally I will turn to a romance novel that has gay male characters. They're usually fully disposable books. It's a bit embarrassing because I feel like anything that is marketed toward a gay male audience automatically ups the sexy quotient, and that makes it feel a little bit prurient. But honestly, everybody needs a break sometimes, and you handle your reading ruts the way you do. I will say, I honestly don't feel that any genre of book should be considered embarrassing. You like what you like, and if it gets you reading, then it's worthwhile, and it's a good thing. So, hey, keep reading. Doesn't matter what it is. And that is the Shameless Book Tag. The final prompt is, of course, tagging. Tag what you deem to be a shameless amount of booktubers to complete this tag. Well, what's more shameless than tagging everybody? So if you're watching this video, consider yourself tagged. There you go. That is my version of the Shameless Book Tag. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it. If you're already subscribed, thank you. If not, I hope you enjoyed this enough to follow along. I will be back again. And until then, happy reading.